Now, the local government minister, Halima Mahama, says the ministry will soon introduce a fresh legislation to Parliament that will address controversies surrounding the registration of names by the Births and Deaths Registry. Haji Halima Mahama has directed the Registrar of Births and Deaths to reverse an initial directive banning the registration of some Ghanaian names. According to the minister, the provision was contained in a 2009 Standard Operating Procedure Manual, which the registrar was seeking to enforce. She says the registrar has since been directed to review the manual to allow for the registration of names like Nana, which they initially considered titles.
Of the SOP, launched in July 2009, provides under Chapter 3 specific instructions on what to capture in the registration of the name of a child. Section 3.3 of the SOP deals with particulars of the child and states that titles should not be added to the names, e.g. Reverend, Alhaji, Doctor, Colonel, Nana, Junior, Senior, and so on, among others. Mr. Speaker, considering that the SOP serves as an operational guideline for the registration of births and deaths, coupled with the sentiments expressed by the public, the Acting Registrar of Births and Deaths Registry has been directed to review the SOP and further directed that names such as Nana, Ni, Papa, and so on, as given by the parents, should be accepted for registration. The registry should perhaps be concerned with just official titles, such as Reverend, Doctor, Mr., Miss, Mrs., Honorable, and so on. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Local Government and Rural Development will very soon bring a bill to Parliament on registration of births and deaths, which will address some of these controversies and to reflect and accommodate present trends and societal developments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Haji Halima Mahama is Minister for Local Government and Rural Development, and Joseph Opoku-Gakpo is our parliamentary correspondent. He's here in the studio with me. Let's find out what happened in Parliament and how it all went down. Joseph, you're welcome. How are you doing?
I'm great. Yourself?
You sound like you've got low energy. Let it come up.
I hear you.
Okay, so when the minister went to the floor and explained what had happened, I suppose it was, well received.
Yes, to a certain extent. For example, Dr. Akoto also, Dr. Akoto say,
right,
the MP for Tafo Pankrono, made the point that those who have criticized the registrar should apologize to him because, as the minister indicated, the laws backing what the law backs what they did to a certain extent because
right,
the Births and Deaths Registration Act requires that the registrar should develop a guideline on how the staff should go about the registration, and this guideline had been developed back in 2009, and he, the registrar, was just seeking to enforce it.
Did that guideline require parliamentary approval of sort? No.
This is an internal document that should be used by officials there to guide them with the registration process. One of the concerns the MPs were raising was that any such standard operational guideline should be in conformity with the provisions of the Act, and they were drawing attention to how, per the Act itself, there wasn't any specific caution or any specific barring of specific names when it comes to the registration processes. So the minority leader, Harry Idrisu, disagreed with the demand for an apology, for example, and felt that the issue is being dealt with, and so that should mainly be the focus. But some MPs actually think that there was nothing wrong with what the minister was seeking to do in the first place. To bring a new legislation? No, nothing wrong with, not the minister, but the registrar was seeking to do in terms of banning the registration of some names like Nana. Benjamin Kodo, the MP for Who Central, is one of them. I've been speaking to him and some other MPs for a reaction to why we all here today.
The registration of names which are given by parents, but which names also are chieftaincy titles. That is where the confusion is coming up from. I don't agree that chieftaincy titles should be registered for children when they are being named. I don't agree to that. Like in my area, you don't name people Togbe right from birth. Togbe is a chieftaincy title given after you have been installed as a chief. So you cannot go and register it at the Births and Deaths Registry when you are born, before you are even installed as a chief. So my position is that let us register the actual names of people. And when they acquire other titles, they could be registered at the appropriate places. For instance, if you have become a chief and you are called Togbe in my area, you go and register it at the traditional council, the House of Chiefs, and get that title attached to you. Like other titles, when you are you hold a PhD, you get it from the university. You are not given at birth before you go and get it. If you are a professor, you get it from the university. You are not registered with it whilst you were born. So I don't agree that titles should be registered. The problem is where in some cultural backgrounds, cultural settings, the same titles which connote chieftaincies and so on and so forth are used again as names for, ordinary names for children when they are born. That is where the confusion is. But to register titles, I don't think it is appropriate.
I'm very happy for the opportunity. You realize that Ghana, for example, you have an identity, which is the culture that you are using. So you have certain things like your name, food you eat, your habitation, other things. There are certain things we use to identify ourselves. I think names are very, very necessary. You see, when you travel and go outside this country, you can be identified best by your name. So we are very happy that the way is cleared by the minister that they should scrap that decision now and make sure that they go on with the registration. But I'm also very happy that there was a bill which is being prepared to be brought to Parliament for consideration. When it comes and we think that the proposal made by the director, some of them are good, we may consider it with respect to some titles. But other than that, I think let's hold on to what has happened today at Parliament. Yes.
Some members of parliament, they're sharing their thoughts. Joseph, so regarding the titles, the minister mentioned a few titles like Mr., Doctor, etc. But those aren't things that are usually registered, are they?
So her point was that for some of those ones, she actually added honorable and indicated that they have the right to stop people from registering those names because that was the intention of the law. But then others like Nana, Toby, people can go ahead and register them and no one would stop them. But then some MPs actually disagreed with her because when she outlined the list of names that they would stop completely from registering, she included honorable. And Hassan Suhini, the MP for Tamale North, on the floor, drew attention that he felt there should probably be, some relaxation when it comes to those provisions. Because
that was a joke, right?
No, he meant it. He
well,
meant it.
I saw him speak on the floor of Parliament. He looked like he was smiling all through.
No, he actually
he was serious.
And I had a conversation with him after that.
Okay.
He's convinced that when it comes to names like Justice, which is a common name, even at the Supreme Court, judges at the level of the Supreme Court are called Justice, so it's a title. Right. There are other names. The West, for example, name people God's way, God is good,
peace,
and all.
Forget me
peace,
not,
hope,
and all of that.
And all. In that same vein, if someone wants to name the child honorable, the fellow shouldn't be stopped. So he felt the legislation that's been brought in needs to be looked at properly, so that then the controversy would really be dealt with once and for all. Because
hopefully it will. Hopefully it will. Were there any timelines from the minister? No,
the minister indicated that the legislation has gone to cabinet. It's back at the ministry. They are doing the necessary fine-tuning, and so sometime soon it will be laid on the floor.
Okay. What else happened on the floor of Parliament that we should know?
So there was a meeting today. You'd recall that the Legal Professions Regulations Act 2017 was laid on the floor of Parliament late last year. It's expected to mature to regulate the admission process to the Ghana Law School. And there's been a petition from law students demanding that Parliament annuls this. This would require a very complicated procedure where the House needs to vote and more than 2/3 of MPs need to approve it. The law students came around earlier in the day to meet the Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament in order for a decision to be taken on their petition requiring an annulment. That meeting is still ongoing. We'll wait to see what the outcome of that will be.
Okay, Joseph, thank you very much for that update. Joseph Opoku Gakpo is our own very hard-working parliamentary correspondent, bringing us up to speed of what happened in Parliament. If you weren't there, you so haven't missed anything.